give me some grace.
Okay, for people who are not 100% aware of this, and I wasn't, though we think of Padma as being a New York person, she was actually born in Delhi, in Safdarjung Hospital. Yes?
Yes, and my grandfather lived there, so my mother went there to have me, and for the first 4 years of my life, I was in Moti Bagh, I was born in Safdarjung, and I still love going back to Delhi. I think it has the best chaat, Bengali market. So those are the priorities that I have when I come to India. I always have a mental list of all the foods I want to eat.
And your other home, where your family was Chennai, or Madras, as I still call it, where you kept going back to.
Yes, I grew up mostly in America. My mother had a very troubled marriage with my father, and in the early 70s, she took a very radical decision to get divorced. And so she went to America, and I stayed with my parents from 2 to 4, and then my grandparents retired to Chennai. We're Palagat Tambrams, and so he wanted to be closer to the south. And so I grew up shuttling between New York and Chennai. So I would spend most of my summers in Madras for 3 months every year. So I still feel very connected to my Indian heritage and my family there. So.
And though it looks effortless, you actually had quite a tough time growing up. Your mother didn't have that much money. There were marriages that were not necessarily the most perfect or the happiest. And you struggled almost all the way through till you end up, from judging by your autobiography, your memoir, in Italy, of all places. How did that happen?
People always ask me, oh, how did you plan on your life? And the truth is, I didn't plan anything. I did the best I could with the opportunities that came to me. There are 2 or 3 young women that I mentor in America, some of which I've had a relationship for 15 years, because I never had a mentor. There was no playbook for my career, and so I wanted to make it easier for them. And the thing that I always say to them is, push against the open door. That is, the opportunities that come to you may not be the exact ones that you have planned for your life or your career, but you never know where that's going to take you. I read somewhere that Steve Jobs, for example, took a calligraphy class in college or whatever. And so when he was designing the iPhone, that actually came in very handy, though at the time no one knew why he should take such a class. And so I think all of the things that I've done in my career path have led me to the career that I have somehow contributed to who I am. And to be honest, I was somebody who had college loans. I had financial aid to go to college, and I had very big loan payments that I had to make. And so for me, modeling was not at first this glamorous endeavor. I was doing very low-level modeling, but it allowed me to pay off my college loans. It allowed me to be independent, and it was a means to an end. I don't think I would have the career as a writer and in food today if I hadn't had the opportunity as a young person to travel and see the world. I think that is an education that in itself that I could have never had coming from the socioeconomic background that I did. And whenever I meet young people who are interested in food, the first thing I say is go, hit the road, travel. Before you have kids, before you have responsibility, just go as soon and as often as you can, because that is really what made me as the person who I am today, is to see other cultures. I was always straddling between Indian culture and American culture. When I went to Madras, I was never Indian enough. When I was in America, I was also not American enough because of my skin color, because of how I looked. I mean, now today, I think it's a lot easier in America, and I like to think that my show, Taste the Nation, also has something to contribute to that conversation, to say that, hey, we Indians, or we Chinese, or we Mexicans, whoever the ethnicity is, we have contributed to the success and the world dominance of the American economy. We are why America is great. because we have taken the best of all our cultures and brought them to bear on our work and on our lives and settling in America. And so I wanted to shift the language a little bit, because people think in America that patriotism is the sole domain of a white person who's a Republican. And I disagree with that analysis. I think Taste the Nation in itself is a huge act of patriotism, or an attempt at patriotism in my part, to really acknowledge all of the contributors to what makes America not only an economic powerhouse, but also a social and cultural powerhouse. I mean, the reason that America is so attractive to young people is because of music and television and film. And all those art forms have also been shaped by the many contributions of the many immigrants or descendants of immigrants who've settled in America.
You
can clap, don't be quiet. This is a very interactive talk. This is the last forum, right, that we're having?
Yeah.
This is the closing thing, so let loose.
Yeah, if you see me pause, that means you should clap, yeah? So go ahead. More seriously, you were Indian in America before there were that many Indians in America, before we were seen as tech wizards and computer geniuses. You've talked about growing up at school, being bullied, having to face racial epithets. Somebody even used the N-word.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? How did you take that?
I think the things that happen to you when you're a young person, at least I can speak for myself, they seem, and they are, genuinely very difficult. But if I look back on my life, and I'm not just saying this to be virtuous, I thank those bullies. I really do. Because it was a great training ground. And they helped me develop a thick skin. And when you're a woman, especially a brown woman in entertainment, believe me, the first thing you need is a really thick skin. And so I knew that the barriers to achieving what I wanted to do would be more plentiful and higher than somebody else. I didn't know about the business. I learned everything the hard way, which is, again, why I make it my business to mentor a few women in their 20s and 30s so that they don't have it as difficult as I had it. And I didn't come from money. My mother is a retired nurse. My stepfather's a plumber. You know, it's a very working class existence. But I do think that all of the difficulties that I had, whether it was my car accident, whether it was being publicly shamed at times in the media also, that those things made me who I am. And I don't think I would be as strong today. I don't believe that you have to go through hardship in order to become resilient. In my case, that was the training ground that I had. And so that is who I am as a result of.
It's, when you read your memoir, the one thing that people who know you now will find odd is that you never thought of yourself as being, let alone beautiful, even particularly attractive. That when you started modeling, it was sort of lower tier, catalog modeling, stuff like that. And you then had the problem of the scar.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about that, because you are now proudly showing off the scar, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. You know, I'm a 53-year-old woman, and the world is constantly telling you that time is up. And I'm here to tell you that time is not up. It is not up at all. And when I was growing up, I didn't see anybody who looked like me. I didn't see anybody on television that looked like me. Maybe towards the end of college, there was Sanjay Gupta on CNN, but that was it.
Much later, and he was a doctor on CNN on astrology.
Exactly. But I mean, I didn't see anybody on television, in advertising, in magazines that resembled me at all. But, you know, I felt that I was attractive based on how people reacted to me, but not that level of attraction. To me, the models on the catwalk or the models in ad campaigns were just sort of a different species. And it was only when I left America and I went to Italy and started modeling there that I began to feel, okay, maybe this is a viable career. But it was only because of what was, again, coming to me as opportunities. And I had so many college loans, and I had no way of knowing how the hell I was going to survive financially and support myself, that I said, okay. I said okay to modeling. I mean, I really had mixed feelings about modeling because I come from a very conservative South Indian family, and I am very much my grandfather's child, you know, and so I was very concerned about how they would feel, and it was not the plan that I had for myself. I was a literature major, I was a theater major, and I never knew that this is what I would do, but it was the best opportunity that came to me, so I had no choice but to take it, and frankly, I was very thankful for it.
The accident, what did that do to your confidence, which gave you the scar? The accident, which gave you the scar, what did that do to your confidence? Because you went on modeling being embarrassed about having the scar.
Yeah,
Right?
well, I had my car accident when I was 14, and I almost lost my right arm. It was shattered into a million pieces. We had a car accident when we were in Los Angeles, and the first doctor said I would never use my arm again. And my mother actually took me to another surgeon who said, well, she's so young, let's try to save the arm. And thank God for him and for her not giving up, because he did save my arm. And so I never also thought I could model, because you have to remember, I started modeling in 1992, 93, when there was no retouching, you know? And so I got very good at covering it up with makeup. I got very good at positioning my body so it was not an issue. But it did impede my modeling a lot. And so I thought, listen, as long as it gives me enough money to live, as long as it pays off my college loans, it's okay. You know, I'll do it until I start working in film and television. So I didn't have a lot of confidence. I just thought it was another job, really.
And then Helmut Newton shoots you.
Yeah.
Yeah? One of the world's most famous, greatest photographers.
Yeah.
And he finds you stunning, and he loves the scar. Tell us that story.
One thing I want to say before I tell you about that is that all of the things in my life that I thought were impediments or that made me different, and so not as much of a saleable product or talent, those in the end were the things that really gave me success. And it's a hard lesson to learn as a young woman. It's not easy to accept that when the world tells you differently. But I was lucky. Helmut Newton was a German photographer who found me and insisted that I shoot with him. And I got this job. My agency was so excited because he was such a big artist. And then I found out I had to pose nude. And so I canceled. I canceled the job 3 days before because I was so nervous. I'd never done anything like that. And everybody was angry with me. My agency, everybody. I thought they were going to drop me. And I just said, look, I don't feel comfortable. And I had a boyfriend at the time who was Italian. He said, if you don't feel comfortable, say no, because the pictures won't come out well anyway. So I turned the great Helmut Newton down. And then 6 weeks later, he called back and he said, okay, it's not going to be nude. What if it's just topless and we position you? It's really your scar I want to show. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I kind of bargained. But I was still really nervous about the pictures because they're very provocative. So I drove down from Milan to Monte Carlo. And the atmosphere in the room was not sexual at all, was not provocative at all. It felt like being with my grandfather. Like, he was very kind. He talked about his wife a lot. He had a lot of female assistants. Not a lot, but a couple of people around. He used my own makeup artist and hair person. And it was the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. And that really took me from being just a low-level fit model to all of a sudden working a ton. I mean, it happened literally within 3 months. And all the same designers that were saying they didn't want me on their catwalk, and I could only be on their catwalk with long sleeves, now they were saying they did want me, and they wanted to make sure that I was in short sleeves so that the scar would show, because Helmut Newton made it cool. But one thing that taught me is that standards of beauty are very arbitrary. You know, when I was growing up in India, everyone would always say, everybody in my family would try to feed me, because I was so skinny. You know, I was this tall when I was 14. You can imagine in Chennai going to St. Michael's Academy, how that would have felt. And when I was in America, there were completely different beauty standards. So I've always had to translate for myself what is the right thing, and it's usually somewhere in the middle. And I think this is an experience that every immigrant kid goes through. There's a lot of code switching, but none of us are the same person all the time. You're the same, you know, are you the same with your boss as you are with your wife or husband, or are you the same with your children, or are you the same with your drinking buddies when no one's listening? We're all different versions of ourselves. And I think that lesson as well taught me how to be a little bit of a chameleon and how to navigate each situation in a way that was most appropriate.
If we look at you now, you're a role model not just for brown women, but for women all over the world, and especially in America. You seem brilliantly put together, totally articulate, totally confident. Yet, judging by your memoir, you weren't like that for much of your early life.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't very confident because the world gave me lots of reasons to be insecure, and I think any woman in this room would understand what that means. I mean, is there anyone who doesn't understand what that means? No.
No hands are gone up, yeah.
So, but the thing is, inside, even if you're shaking inside, and believe me, when you see me in different situations, a lot of those times I'm shaking inside. The only thing I remember is how much my mother suffered. The only thing I remember is how many sacrifices that she had to make. And you know, in the 70s, it was very taboo what she did. And she just made a new life for us. And so I want to pay her back. I want to make her proud. And I think somewhere, even my grandfather, as conservative as he was, I know approves, you know. And so I'm not immune to seeking approval from those who I respect. But at the end of the day, you realize that you have to make your own code of ethics, your own code of what's right. And there have been lots of times when people advise me to do things differently, but I had to learn to listen to that voice in my head. And it's a really hard thing. And I tell my daughter that all the time too, like, really, like physically just go into a private place, even if it's just a bathroom stall in some hotel, and just ask yourself, what do you want? And if it's a yes or no question, I guarantee you some voice, some feeling inside your body, whether it's in your gut or your heart or your mind, will tell you what the right answer is. And the only time that I've misfired is when I haven't listened to that voice. And that voice is like a muscle. The more you use that voice, the stronger it gets. The more you listen to that voice, the stronger it gets. And now it's not that I'm so confident. I still feel incredibly insecure in certain sections. You know, there are things that have happened to me now, this last year, that I would have killed for to happen to me when I was 30 or 25 or really modeling or really wanted to be an actor or whatever. And they didn't happen. The fact that they're happening to me now, I think I can savor it a lot more, but I can also handle it a lot better and put it in perspective. You know, I am who I am, whether my shows are very popular or I don't have any shows. And that takes a lot of self-talk. Like, it sounds so corny, but I'm serious. Like, it really takes talking yourself down emotionally from a cliff, you know, and saying, it's okay, life is long, you've got to do what you think is right.
In your personal life, you've suffered pain, you've suffered loss, death, etc. And yet, somehow, you seem to be stronger, almost as a consequence. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I had this really bad car accident, but 2 days before the car accident, I had a very bad and rare disease that landed me in the hospital, and I had just gotten out of the hospital on a Friday and then got right back in the hospital on Sunday. My mother was quite religious, and the Hindu temple closest to our house was 50 miles away, and on the way back from doing an archana to say thank you for getting my kid out of the hospital. We had a car accident and I landed right back in the hospital for months and months. And then, yes, you know, I've suffered a very public breakup. I've suffered a lot in the public eye, so that's been very difficult. You have to learn how to block that out. And I've also gone through a lot of sadness. I never have had a relationship with my father. Every time I would come to India, I would go to restaurants or canteens or whatever, and I would look at all the men who would be about the age of my father. And I would wonder, is that my dad? Is that my dad? I didn't even have any pictures of him, because when they divorced, I was only 2, and they ripped up all the pictures. They just, you know, he didn't want anything to do with me. He made my mother sign an affidavit saying she would never ask for support from him in order to grant her the divorce, in order to let her take me out of India. And so I think from a very young, early childhood age of development, I always had this feeling of not being good enough, because if your own father rejects you, you know, whatever happened between them in their marriage, like, that's between them. But why didn't he want me? You know, I think that was a very difficult thing to go through. I don't know about the medical history of one half of my family, so you're reminded of it every time you go to the doctor. I don't really celebrate Father's Day. You know, things like that, just little things that do affect you. And, you know, very recently, I got a phone call informing me that my biological father had died. And he had actually died a year ago. And I didn't know that until a month ago. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I burst out into tears. And I was thinking, why am I crying? You know, why? Because how can you miss something you never knew? Yeah. But I think I'm mourning because all those feelings of being a child who didn't feel wanted have come up again as a grown woman, regardless of what I've been through or accomplished. It's very hard, you know. Grieving without a memory is like bleeding without a wound. You don't know where it's coming from. But in the end of the day, I have to also thank my father, because him rejecting me made me that much more ambitious, made me that much more want to prove myself. And I may not have become the person I am if we never went to America. And we wouldn't have gone to America. My mother would have had a nice upper middle class marriage, and that would have been it. Yeah. So even the most difficult things that I've been through have been a benefit in some way. And everything is a benefit if you look at it the right way. Even when it's hard to do that, it is a healthy thing to do that if you can. And that is what has saved me from the abyss. Just having a sense of humor and saying, it's okay, fuck him. You know, excuse me. But, you know, just like, yeah. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be who I am in spite of that. And that has been incredibly gratifying. So I don't want this to turn into a sad talk, because it's not. It's a happy talk. It's a successful talk. Because here I am, being flown to India to speak to all of you. And I'm sure you've had such a wonderful array of very important speakers, and I'm really honored to be part of that group. So thank you.
I paused to let them clap properly. But the other thing, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about it, is one of the things you've gone through in your life is how much difficulty women have with their health often, because things are not diagnosed properly, they don't talk about it, they suffer, they're made to believe almost it's their job to suffer because they're women. So tell us a little bit about it. I don't want to go into too much detail, because I'm sure there are many women here in this audience who will be inspired by what you went through.
I had endometriosis, and it's a very nasty disease that affects a woman's reproductive system. And we believe 10% of all childbearing women in the world have it. There's also preliminary research that says Asians are more predisposed to it, but we don't have enough funding to really back that claim up. There are studies in Singapore that have been done. So that was the case with me. I had terrible pain. I was in bed 1 week a month every time during my period. And you know, I'm a pretty outspoken person, but believe me, it was the last thing I wanted to do was get up on a stage and start talking about my vagina. It's like so unsexy. But I felt it was important because once I finally got the treatment that I needed, I realized what life was like for women who didn't have it. And so there is treatment through laparoscopic surgery. So I started a foundation with my surgeon in 2009 to educate people about it, to also raise money for research, to raise awareness. We have an education program that is to date educated 35,000 teenagers about the disease in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We've also changed laws in the state of New York to say that anytime there is sex education, you should also teach about this illness and related illnesses to the women's reproductive system, like PCOS, like, you know, all of these things, fibroids. And we insist on going into the science class, not the health class and not the phys ed, physical education class, because we want to educate men or boys as well as girls. Because a boy who understands about it will become a better brother, a better uncle, a better father, a better husband, and be more understanding. And so we've had a lot of great luck. We've managed to double the funding that the federal government gives to this illness. We've managed to change all kinds of state laws. We've managed to also fund research in many, many different hospitals and universities. And we've also managed to change how medical schools teach this illness. And I'm proud to say that it will probably be the thing that I'm most known for. Yeah. We opened a Center for Research of Gynopathology, the first of its kind in the country, with MIT, along with Harvard Medical School. And, you know, I was told I couldn't have children. Right about the time I got divorced, I was told that I would never have kids, and it devastated me. I was 36, I was single, I knew I wanted to be a mother. And that's also, I think, what catalyzed me to start the foundation, that anger. So anytime you can, you can turn pain into power, it feels so liberating. It's the only useful thing you can do. And so I love when women come up to me when I'm hailing a taxi in New York, when they say, you know, thank you for helping me. My doctor didn't listen, and then I showed him this video. I told him to go to your website. So it's been really the honor of my life to be able to help in that way.
And change people's lives.
Yeah.
Yes, how many people get an opportunity to do that?
Yeah.
It will be, I think, in the long run, what you're most remembered for.
Yeah.
In the short run, though, you're most remembered for Top Chef. So let's talk.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about that. You were, as far as I know, anywhere in the Western world, the first Indian personality to go on to a food show and be there because of who she was, not because they were going to do Mikchana Bhatura or dosas or whatever.
Yeah.
You went there as a sort of just a person. So tell us how you got that, and did you enjoy it?
I have enjoyed it. It's allowed me to meet chefs from all over the world. Top Chef is in 175 countries, and it's the world's most powerful food show in any country. I mean, whether it's very successful in a particular country or not is kind of irrelevant, because in the industry, it's known as the gold standard. And it's been, I'm not a chef. I don't want to be a chef. I'm a food writer. That's what I do. And so when I first got the job, I think people were a little skeptical of what's this ex-model know about food. And I too felt, you know, I suffered from imposter syndrome a lot. But whenever I'm insecure or have anxiety, the only thing I know how to do is put that energy into research or hard work or studying or whatever, because it occupies my mind and it's an antidote to that, excuse me. So I think that's what I did. And over the years, I think I just, out of sheer will and repetition, I was able to earn the respect of my colleagues and say, no, actually, she does know about food. My grandmother was a great cook. All the women in my family were great cooks. You know, I learned about spices and about Eastern food, Indian food, through them. And then spending my 20s as a model in France and Italy also taught me about European cooking technique. And those things are valuable. So that, you know, that's what that was. But when I started Top Chef, again, I had no idea it would become this cultural phenomenon. When I did Top Chef, I just said yes because I thought it would give my cookbook a little boost, you know? And it certainly did. I can't complain.
I want to talk a little bit about Indian Americans in the US, because suddenly they're all over, whether it's Nikki Haley or it's Vivek Ramaswamy, or it's even Kamala Harris, who's half Indian. Suddenly, from being the sort of skinny kid who was bullied at school and people didn't know anything about India, or they associated India, as you've written in your book, which is poverty and smell, suddenly they're all over. So here's my question. Why aren't more of them better role models?
I can't speak for Nikki Haley, and I really don't want to speak for Ramaswamy because I don't share their political views. And it's funny, I have a lot of Indian friends in New York, obviously, and we always talk about, like, where are the progressive liberal Indians? And we figured out that they don't want to be in politics because they've seen how dirty it can be. But I do think that, you know, but not only in politics, if you look at Silicon Valley, I mean, all the major CEOs are also Indian. That's not an accident, you know. I don't think it's an accident. I think in America is a country of capitalism, and it's a country that values accomplishment and the dollar more than anything else. So, you know, that's why those people have, for whatever reason, done what they need to do, say what they need to say to get where they are. I have no idea of knowing whether Nikki Haley or Ramaswamy or Bobby Jindal really feel all of the atrocious things that they say, but maybe they do. I don't know. You know, it's interesting about Kamala because Kamala Harris actually, her grandfather lived right around the corner from our house in Besant Nagar in Chennai, and I would have walked by. In fact, the apartment under her or above her was our family doctor for 50 years. So I'm surprised that we never crossed paths. And she's actually way more Indian. She gets touted a lot or pegged as black, which because she presents as black, and she has to lean into that. But when you talk to her, it's very clear that she's much more Indian than she is black. Let's see what happens there.
Well, she might well be president one day. Huh? Anything's possible.
Anything is.
So you know her then?
I do know her. I know Kamala, yeah. I don't know her well.
But you know her?
Yeah.
And you know Nikki Haley well?
I've never met Nikki Haley.
Oh, that's a shame.
No, is it? Is it a shame? I don't know.
But, I mean, what happens when people like her and Ramaswamy, what's the other guy's name? Bobby Jindal. When they get up there and they convert to Christianity and they pretend to be more American right-wing than right-wing Americans, what kind of role model, what kind of impression does that give to Indians? People in India who see you realize that it's possible in America for somebody who'd had all your disadvantages to still make it. And then we see people like that who represent all of the things we don't like about America. So how does that feel?
I think there are a lot of, to be fair, I don't agree with the politics of those people, okay? But to be fair, I do think there are a lot of Indians that are closet conservatives in America.
Really?
I do. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. I think that of a certain generation, people did have to whitewash themselves or assimilate, whether it's changing your name or changing the way you speak about your beliefs. I cannot tell you whether Nikki Haley really believes all of the vitriol that she spews.
Yeah.
I cannot vouch for Bobby Jindal or Ramaswamy at all either. What I can tell you is that America allows for all of those people to have a voice. That is the double-edged sword. That's the good part and the bad part. I like to think that I give people another face of what it means to be an Indian American, and an Indian woman, not only in America, but in the world. I don't consider my playground the United States, although that is clearly where I live and do my business. I think Top Chef has afforded me that privilege. I think of myself as a global citizen and somebody who is a citizen of the world in the truest sense. The two totems of my life have always been travel and food. And I think it's made me, hopefully, a more empathic and broad-minded person. I think those people that you mentioned are beholden to being elected. And so they have to say things that will gain them support. I am beholden to the networks of American television, but I am not being, I'm not going to run for election. I can speak my mind. I try to be respectful to everybody, but I don't always succeed either.
No, fair enough. But you also, I find in your work, capture the diversity of America. Taste the Nation, for instance. You traveled and you found out things that I'd never imagined about American food. You looked at the food of the black community. You looked at how they brought rice to the South. So what made you do that?
I think my own experience working, in 2016, during the election, I started working with the American Civil Liberties Union. I was very disturbed by all of the negative vitriol that was coming out of Trump, Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, everybody named Steve for some reason. But, like all of that, Muslim bans and against immigrants, and they're all criminals, and it's all bullshit. The truth is, immigrants have the lowest criminals or lowest perpetrators of crime in America. They pay the most taxes. Any sort of Pew Research or any independent study you will see that we are not the problem. And America is so interesting. I believe that everybody has an interesting story to tell. You just have to be willing to listen. And so it has been the joy of my life. Top Chef is a very big accomplishment, but I didn't create that show. Taste the Nation is completely my creation from start to finish. What people don't realize is that 75% of what I do on Taste the Nation is actually behind the camera. I have a whole bunch of producers who report to me, and I have a producing partner who's very good at the technical stuff like cameras and lighting and all that. But I write the show, I research the show, I work with producers who are very gifted, who, find the people who we're going to talk to. And it has been the honor of my life. Once you start doing your own material, you never want to be in anyone else's project. I'm not saying I'm not going to. I still have a big house and office to run and pay for, so I'll do what I have to. But it's been great because I've had black people come to me and say, I never knew about the Gullah Geechee community. Or, other people say, I never knew about this Thai community in Las Vegas. And there's a whole bunch of Thai war brides that came to Las Vegas because of Nellis Air Force Base. They came with the Vietnam War as refugees or as wives of soldiers who had been, stationed there. And all these stories, in my mind, are to make Americans more interested in their neighbors, to be less afraid of somebody who has a name you can't pronounce or eats foods that you don't know. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. Whether you're Colombian or Swedish or whatever, we want to take care of our kids, we want to educate them, we want a nice house so we feel safe and we can be nurtured and flourish. We want to take care of our elders when they get old. Those values are not Indian values or American values, they're just values. And I like to think that there's more that connects us than separates us. And so after working with the ACLU for 7 years and interviewing all these different immigrants of all these different kinds, and I got a full legal education by one of the country's most eminent scholars on immigration law. I went down to the southern border in Brownsville, Texas. I walked on foot in Matamoros and in Reynosa, two of the most dangerous border crossings, to see in August, which was probably dumb, but to see what is it like to go through that process of asylum. And it's harrowing. And so Taste the Nation is a direct product of my civil rights advocacy work, and it is informed by that. And so rather than getting on my soapbox and lecturing people this is a softer way to do it. You know, nobody wants to talk about politics or religion, but they'll all tell you about their grandmother's favorite, you know, recipe for cookies or whatever. So it's a good Trojan horse to get people to open up. And I'm very indebted to all of our participants who open their homes, who share their lives, who talk about some really, really painful things on our show. And I'm indebted to them for making our show what it is. And I can't tell you how many teachers write to me and say, we're showing Taste the Nation in our classrooms because it's much better than anything in our history or social studies books about what America is like, also about the Native American population and what kind of cultures they have within their communities across the country.
You are a food goddess, so I'll have to ask you a few food questions before we end.
Yeah.
Comfort dish, if you were at home, what would you eat?
Tair sadam.
You've said that's really true, yeah?
Yeah. Tair sadam. Tair
With
sadam
pickle
with
and
vepla
papad?
katti.
With
If
pickle
somebody
and-
knows what that is here.
Pickle and papad or just on its own?
No papad, because papad you have to fry, so it's a little bit hard. When you're trying to get into a bathing suit for a photo shoot, you have to leave the papad behind.
Favorite American street food? I know there's a lot of hot dogs in your book. Is that still a favorite food?
It changes from time to time. I love a good thin crust pizza. I love nachos, which I guess are Mexican, but I also do love hot dogs, it's true.
Yeah. Pizza. You talk in your book about going to Italy and discovering that pizza in Italy wasn't quite the same as pizza in America.
Yes.
Which kind do you prefer?
I prefer the Italian kind.
Why? Just explain to them what the difference is.
Well, okay, so pizza in America can be with a really thick crust or thick dough, and it can be really doughy, or it can be really thin. I like a good New York slice, which is a large, thin pie that you just eat by the slice. And that's how I grew up eating at lunch. You know, I would sneak out of school, and it would cost $1 in those days. Italian pizzas are more personal size. They're still thin. Neapolitan pizza is slightly higher than Roman pizza. I actually prefer Roman pizza, though everybody says Neapolitan is the best. And you eat it with a knife and fork, which until I was in Italy in my early 20s was a revelation to me. So, you know, it's funny because I talk about these things that are so kind of lo-fi, you know. But then at the end of the day, talk about what interests you and what you love, because it winds you up on Time magazine.
You've worked with, on television, with some of the world's greatest chefs. Any favorites?
I love
You
Eric
can say it in India
Ripert.
because they won't find out and you can sort of say what
No,
you like.
I mean, it's pretty easy to say. I mean, I like Eric Ripert. He's a French chef in New York. He's very thoughtful about the food he makes. He doesn't have a vast empire. He could. He doesn't, because he's really an artist who wants to do the art of food rather than the commerce of food. I mean, he's incredibly successful. I think he's great. I think there are a lot of women chefs that are really talented. Dominique Crenn, who has Atelier Crenn, if you're ever in San Francisco, is great. Suzanne Goin in Los Angeles is really interesting.
Okay.
And there are a lot of people, you know, I'm really excited about 11 Madison Park because...
The new vegan menu?
Yeah, the new vegan menu. I think it's a lot of money to pay for vegan food, but I think there's artistry to that as well. So I'm very excited that he's doing it because, you know, so many members of my family are vegetarians, so it's nice to be able to now take them to a high-end meal like that. But Eric has always had a vegetarian menu. It's just gone lo-fi, you know, like again, nobody makes a big deal about it.
Indian chefs working abroad, any favorites?
I like Gagan Anand, but I've eaten his food, but I've never eaten his food in Thailand, so I can't comment about...
But he was on Top Chef with you in London, right?
Yes, yeah.
Anything in New York that you like?
Anything? Yes. Actually, there's a guy, he has a restaurant named Sema, and it's a South Indian restaurant, and it's the hardest restaurant to get into in all of New York. You have, like, I can't tell you how many people call me to say, can you get me into this restaurant? I have to tell them, no, I can't, because it means I have to sit there. Vijay Kumar. from SEMA. He's doing extraordinary work, and he's this cute little guy with this wide smile. And he's even taught me about a lot of non-veg South Indian food, because obviously we were not allowed to eat that when I was growing up. So I've learned a lot about, you know, what are the beautiful recipes that are non-veg, Chettinad food, different kinds of things from him.
Last meal on earth, if you had to pick one thing?
That changes all the time, but maybe some fried chicken with dai salam on the side, so I get the best of both worlds.
What Southern style fried chicken, Korean fried chicken, what kind of fried chicken?
My fried chicken, my recipe, which has amchur and chili powder in the crust, which is what makes it good. And it also has some rice flour. If you don't have rice flour, use Rice Krispies, and that makes it that much more crispy.
So Padma's fried chicken and curd rice.
Yes.
Oh, what a happy note to end this session on. Ladies and gentlemen, Padma Lakshmi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That was really inspiring. I think you've inspired a lot of people in the audience. And often when people see somebody who looks like you, they don't realize what went into becoming you. Yeah? And I think it's important to realize that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanghvi. And thank you so much, Padma. You've certainly made us hungry, and you've also made us think a lot. And what's lovely about today is that we started the day by listening to an important global voice. Suela Braverman is sitting right here. She spoke with us in the morning. And we're ending this day by listening to another global icon, and that is the power, that is the rise of the Indian diaspora, ladies and gentlemen. Padma, we think you're a change maker. We think you've made positive impact in the world around you. So we'd like to send you away with a little memento. First up, I'd like to invite on stage Rajiv Dubey, Media Head, Dabur India, to join us on stage and present Padma with a memento to take away from the stage of Ideas of India. And for the Change Maker citation, please welcome on stage Rajiv Khandekar, editor, ABP Maja and ABP News. Thank you, Padma, for being a change maker in the field of activism, for giving multiculturalism a seat at the high table. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much once again. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Mr. Sanghvi. Once again, a brilliant conversation, the way only you can do. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, from the interpretations of the Ram Rajya to electoral trends, the layers of the Indian legal framework, learning from top economists, political scientists, artists, of course, global perspectives, we have packed in a lot in the past 2 days, have we not? We certainly have. Now, this is supposed to be the end, but I would like to think that this is the beginning, because we have the next 1 year to act upon the takeaways we have from this stage of Ideas of India. Thank you all so much for being such a wonderful audience, for being such an engaging audience. And a big thanks to our editorial teams, our technical team, our production team. There's so many people to thank, all our wonderful session chairs as well. But most of all, thanks to the audience for being an active participant in this edition of Ideas of India. My name is Radhika Bajaj. It's been such a privilege to be your host. See you all at Ideas of India 2025.
Thank you, Radhika. You have been a great master of ceremony. We are very grateful to you. It's an honor to work with you. See you next year as well. Thank you, everybody.
Arise, awake, apne andar tu dekh. The best of all is coming through. Apne rights, apni fight, left or right. Ki awaaz ko tum bhi suno. Let's talk fearless and free. Phir gunje apni unity. सिर उठा के सोच घुमा के